Get it, boys.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to HTF Bets. My name is Robert Husby. I am your host for this first segment. I'm joined along with one of my co-hosts, Nicholas Geddes. Nick, how you doing today?
Doing good, Robert. Glad to be back on another show of HTF Bets. It has been an eventful sports week, and I'm glad to get into it.
Absolutely. And then we have a returning guest, Miss Hannah Russo. Hannah, how are you doing today?
Doing well. How are you? Thank you for having me again.
Yeah, of course. And today we're doing a little bit different, a little bit of a different segment. We haven't really covered college football yet here on HTF Bets, but I felt it was a good time to talk college football here on HTF Bets, just because the college football season is underway. We're, depending on what conference you're looking at, it's either week 4 or week 5, and we're starting to get some implications. And one of those implications is UCF, and UCF had a low percentage chance to get into the college football playoff this year, just with all the circumstances surrounding COVID. But now it's pretty effectively near zero, as they lost to Tulsa over the weekend. Tulsa just has their number. Hannah, UCF got to be disappointing. They jumped entirely out of the AP top 25. What do you think about this UCF team? What's going wrong here?
Honestly, I was very disappointed because I was sitting there and I was watching call after call and flag after flag be thrown. And what I think needs to be done is we need to be stronger with coaching. Heupel needs to do something about all of the false starts. There were 10 false starts on Saturday night, which is ridiculous, especially for a team that has a name to be upheld in the AAC.
Yeah, and you mentioned the penalties, and that's not a one-off thing. The week before, they had 10 false start penalties in the first quarter. I think in the first quarter alone, they had 10 penalties. So when most of them are false starts, that's a discipline problem on the offensive line for sure. And it's not getting any better. They're the most penalized team in the country by a wide margin. So, Nick, what do the UCF Knights have to do here? I mean, they got to get more disciplined, obviously, but if you're losing to teams like Tulsa, and no disrespect to Tulsa, Tulsa have been the last 2 seasons UCF's toughest opponent, which is a shock to say. But how do you start, because this is going to affect other games as well, how do you start getting more disciplined, and how do you start to turn these games in your favor and not taking penalties every other play, it seems like?
I mean, it's a coaching thing. It's going to come down to coaching when there's penalties like this, and there's a theme of this. They were not this penalized under Scott Frost, and ever since Heupel has come here, they just have not been able to control the penalties. It's not new to this year. Last year, they were the 4th most team penalized in all of FBS. This year, they're first. I've never heard of – they almost had 40 penalties in the last 2 games. I've never heard of that. And, there was some rotation on the offensive line last week, so I cut them some slack there. But there's no excuse. And Matthew Lee at center, I mean – and especially in the fourth quarter, it's crunch time. You've already given up the huge lead. He made it impossible in that last drive for them to really just go down the field and get in sync to try to win the game. It was just bad snap, false start. It just wasn't happening for UCF. They didn't run the ball much at all in that game. 3.7 yards per carry, way below their average. And part of that is Greg McCray, his lingering injuries, and did not play much of that game. And the onus was on Otis Anderson. And while he was solid, they just didn't have anybody else there ready to take the reins. And Tulsa as a team, they played Oklahoma State tough, the prior week. So they've showed a lot of heart here early on against tough opponents. So we'll see what they're made of going forward. But yeah, UCF, you can't say you want to be in the college football playoff and be this undisciplined. Undisciplined teams do not make the college football playoff. They really don't make much noise outside of their conference. And that's what's happened with UCF, out of the rankings. And they have the bye week now. So there's some time I would like to think next time we see them in a week and a half, they're going to be much better disciplined. And I want to see the penalties, at least cut those by half, because you're not going to win many football games if you keep getting penalized like that.
Yeah, absolutely. It's absolutely a problem. And you see, 18 penalties this past weekend, 19 penalties, a school record the week before. That's just ridiculous. And against a team like ECU, it didn't come back to bite them. They gave up a lot of points to ECU towards the end of the game, but it didn't cost them. They still won the game. Against Tulsa kind of shut down the offense. So when they shut down the offense and you're taking all those penalties, it comes back to bite you. You can't do that against Cincinnati if you want to win the conference. You can't do that if you get a New Year's Six bowl and you have to play. I think I've seen, polls earlier saying maybe they get UF. If they get a team like UF, which UF might be in the college football playoff, not going to end well for UCF if they're this undisciplined. So absolutely, they need to take this next week, and they need to sort of figure themselves out and work on their discipline issues, because it's becoming a problem, and it's been a problem. So Hannah, I'm going to go to you next with this. We're going to move over to Oklahoma. Oklahoma have opened the season 0-2, one of the worst records they've had in a while. Oklahoma were, I think, the sixth favorite coming in to make the college football playoffs. They've dropped out of the top 10 now. They're still among the top 20, but their odds are further dropping every loss they sustain. So what went wrong, do you think, against Iowa State? Iowa State's now ranked number 24. What's going wrong for this Oklahoma team?
I noticed that there was a lot with the offense. That's what I mainly took note to. I mean, Spencer Rattler played a pretty decent game. It was probably a better game for him considering the last game. But in their final drive, he had a pass to the end zone that was intercepted by Iowa State, and that completely knocked them off for the rest of the game. And his passing yards and completions for last Saturday were not his best. Like, he could have done better, and it's just going to be something that he has to go out there and practice on and build up his momentum for again.
Yeah, absolutely. And Spencer Rattler was a favorite for the Heisman coming into the season. So far, he's had a little bit of up and downs. It's no surprise. He's a redshirt freshman. He's not going to get it just like that. So I think there was a lot of pressure coming in on him and Lincoln Riley's team. But listen, Lincoln Riley's team's not doing well right now. So, Nick, what do you think is wrong with this Oklahoma team? Where do they need to improve? And they play Texas this week. Texas is ranked number 22. Texas is starting to struggle. Their defense doesn't look great. What do you think is happening with this Oklahoma team heading into this weekend against Texas?
Well, two things. You look at the previous years that they've been successful. It's been Baker Mayfield. It's been Kyler Murray. It's been Jalen Hurts. All these guys have been able to run out of the pocket a decent amount, especially Kyler and Jalen Hurts. They're living off of running out of the pocket and making plays with their feet. Spencer Rattler's just not going to do that. He's a pocket passer, which we really haven't seen at Oklahoma for the last decade, really. So there's a little bit of a change there. In the running game, there's no Joe Mixon. There's no Rodney Anderson. There's no Trey Sermon, Kennedy Brooks, some of the great running backs they've had in that program the last 5-6 years. They don't have any guy like that. And as a result, they're not running the ball very well at all. And when you don't have help for a redshirt freshman quarterback like Spencer Rattler, he's going to make mistakes. And we've seen that with 4 interceptions so far early on in the year. He's made some mistakes, and he just hasn't been able to push the field at the pace that Oklahoma would like. And then defensively, it's kind of the story with Oklahoma and all these Big 12 teams. They can't stop a lick on defense. And Oklahoma right now, in yards per play given up, they're giving up the 8th most yards per play in the FBS at almost 7 yards a play. So you're not putting your defense in. The defense is not putting themselves in good situations at all to get stops, get 3-down stops, and that's putting an onus on them as well. And Iowa State took advantage. So Oklahoma right now, college football playoff dreams are done, and at this point, it's about maturing Spencer Rattler and looking forward to the next years that you have with him.
Absolutely. So let's talk about. I mentioned briefly this weekend against Texas. Texas is still ranked, but Texas has dropped out of the top 10. So in this matchup, you have Oklahoma either going 0-3 or Oklahoma getting their first win of the season. And right now, the Big 12 is wide open, I would say. Even with Iowa State and Texas ranked, it's pretty wide open. So, Hannah, if you had to place a bet on who's going to win this Big 12 and who's going to win this week, because I feel like if this weekend sees Oklahoma go 0-3, they're probably done in the conference. It seems like maybe Texas is probably going to hold it the rest of the season, if not Iowa State. So who would you bet on winning the Big 12 matchup this weekend and potentially the rest of the season?
I believe the Big 12 started a lot later than the SEC and a bunch of other conferences as far as practices and deciding that they were actually going to play this fall. So I also wouldn't eliminate Ohio State yet. They're someone that I think we have to watch, and with Texas too this upcoming weekend, I believe they have a 67% chance of winning over Oklahoma.
So you say Texas? All right. Nick, who you see? You see Texas or Oklahoma in this matchup?
Yeah, I think Oklahoma, and not to correct me, they have one win this year. They got the first win this year against a lousy opponent in the beginning of the season. So they are 1-2. They have the win under their belt.
That's right. Yeah.
I just can't see them going 1-3 because they're just too talented. And I think they're going to get this win against Texas. Texas right now is reeling, and I think Tom Herman, the seat right now is flaming for him. If he does not win this game, I think you're going to see a revolt in Texas to try to get him out of there. It's a big game for Texas, and I think for Oklahoma, they have the better players. They have Spencer Rattler. I know Sam Ehlinger's been playing well, but I don't trust a lot of the weapons around him. And I think for both these defenses, it's going to be a toss-up. But I'm going to go with Oklahoma because I think Lincoln Riley is just going to be able to outcoach Tom Herman.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty safe bet. I think as bad as Oklahoma's defense has been so far to start the season and how uncomfortable Spencer Rattler's looked, I think they're going to be able to pull it out. I'm not sold at all on this Texas team. Too many people have been saying Texas is back. They always say Texas is back, and it ends up biting them like usual. So this Texas defense is not good. The offense has been fine, but they gave up 56 points to Texas Tech in their first game, and they had to go to overtime, and it was really not that convincing of a win. Yeah, they never looked like a top 10 team in my opinion, and I would say that they're barely a top 25 team at this point given how bad their defense is. And if Oklahoma beats them this weekend, they're out of the top 25. So I think that's a pretty safe bet to say Oklahoma wins this weekend. So let's move into the last part of this segment real quick. Hannah, if there's one team so far that you think has a good chance at the college football playoff. Now, obviously, we haven't seen the Big Ten, we haven't seen Ohio State, we haven't seen Penn State, so it's contingent on them coming back and actually playing well this season. But Ohio State, I believe, is second or third in college football favorite points. Clemson's up there, Bama's second, I believe, and then UF is either third or fourth. So if you have one of those top four or someone outside the top four, like a Georgia or Notre Dame, who would be your pick early this season so far for the college football championship?
I'm going to go with Georgia because right now they're ranked number 3 and they've come out strong this season with the freshman quarterback. He's honestly very ordinary. He's not Jake Fromm and he's not Trevor Lawrence. And last season, the Bulldogs had a great defense that showed out. They were able to be consistent in keeping their opponents from scoring. And this season, their defense has not shied from that. They're doing really well. And they have a ton of new defensive picks that are filling the 5 spots of the seniors that graduated last year. So I wouldn't count them out yet. Like, they might choke at the end of the year like they always do, but I think Kirby Smart's got a great team this year.
Yeah, so Georgia's ranked third overall right now. They're, I believe, fifth in favorites for the college football championship. So not everybody's believing in them, but yeah, so far they've looked very strong. So I think that's a good pick. Nick, what about you? Who do you see as a favorite?
I think it's just the ho-hum. It's Clemson. It's the way they've looked. I know they haven't had a tough opponent yet, but I think Clemson at their best, I think they can beat anybody in the nation when they want to by 20 plus. I really do. I mean, Trevor Lawrence right now is playing just out of his mind. He's NFL ready. I mean, as far as I've heard, anything I'm seeing right now is it's NFL level play, and he's really only had to play a half, and then they pull him out because that's just how dominant they are. And, it's a really big test now against Miami. Well, it's really the test for Miami against Clemson. We'll see how Miami shows against Clemson. So that's going to be a really big game. We're finally – I think we're going to see Trevor Lawrence play the full 4 quarters, the same with Travis Etienne. And I think Clemson, personally, I think can give it to him by anywhere from 20 to 30 points. And I think they can run through the rest of this ACC schedule, win the ACC championship. And I think you'll see them right back in the college football playoff. And I think they're going to go wire to wire, 1-1 undefeated.
Yeah, I think I'd love to be wrong about that just because I like to see different teams win. I mean, if you see Alabama win, it's not really that much different. But, seeing Clemson, I think the way they've played so far and how good Travis Etienne is and how good you said, Trevor Lawrence is. Trevor Lawrence, coming out of college, he's probably going to be one of the best NFL-ready quarterbacks you've seen in the last decade or so, if not more than that. I mean, the guy is an absolute baller. He's fantastic. So I think as long as they have Trevor Lawrence, this is his last season there. He's going to go first overall next year, most likely, in the NFL draft. I think you got to ride Trevor Lawrence, and I think you got to ride Clemson. There's no doubt about it why they're the number-ranked team in football, and they're the number 1 favorite for the college football playoffs for a lot of analysts. It's no surprise. So, yeah, I definitely agree with your statement there. As boring as it is, I think right now it has to be Clemson. I think UF is really proving a lot of people wrong. UF looks great so far, but I don't think they're better than Clemson. I don't think a lot of these teams are better than Clemson. So, yeah, I'm gonna have to go Clemson there as well for the favorite. So, yeah, that pretty much does it for this segment. It's finally great to talk some college football. We're still in the early parts of the season. We got a long way to go. We still have Big Ten football. We still have Pac-12 football. So these standings are going to change. These favorites are going to change when you see Ohio State and Oregon and Penn State come into the picture and start finally playing games. So thank you guys so much for joining me for this segment. When we come back, we will be talking soccer for the first time on HTF Bets this season. Stick around.
Welcome back to this segment of HTF Bets, where we are going to dive into the other football that occurs that occurs across the pond in Europe and all around the world. And for that, we're going to be joined by HTFN soccer expert Manuel. Manuel, how you doing today?
Good. Nice to be here.
Yeah, glad to have you on to dive in. And we're also joined by Okelo Pena as well, our co-host. How you doing today?
Doing great, guys. I mean, I'm really excited to talk about soccer. I think, the Premier League is one of my most favorite time of the year outside of Christmas and, of course, the other football across the pond. So to dive in, hopefully to try to see if my boys in Man U can get their act together this year. We'll dive into a lot. So I'm just ready to just talk and give them some soccer talk. So I'm ready.
Yeah, very excited for this. It has been an awesome transfer market to be following Fabrizio Romano around and getting to see all his updates throughout this. So I've enjoyed it. So Manuel, I'm going to come to you. What has been your thoughts on the transfer market? Who do you think is going to have the biggest impact on their new team?
Well, for the transfer market, obviously it's been pretty wild. To me, I would say for sure. Obviously, James already made an impact, right? Came from Real Madrid. Zidane never really used him. Whatever. They didn't really have to use a center attacking mid in Madrid. Usually use more like 3 center holding midfielders, just like that. But at Everton, my man's been linking up with Richarlison pretty well. Allen has been great. Legitimately, Everton have won for me in the transfer market. They rebuild the midfield. They got Doucouré, James, Allen. They done well, but something that happened last minute, which is actually it's pretty mind blowing. The fact that Arsenal got Partey from Atletico Madrid at the last second of the transfer window. Not gonna lie, Arsenal have been looking for a CDM, I would say, for about 5 years, right? Arsenal, that signing was probably pretty good for them. They screw over Atletico, obviously, but they also got Torreira, but I don't know how well that's gonna do. But I would say either Partey or James, which is already showing.
Yeah, I think James looks reborn under Everton and Ancelotti, and he's always played his best soccer under Ancelotti. So there's no surprise there. I'm going to keep with you real quick. Kind of a side question. You're a big Barcelona fan. A lot was made about in the beginning. Messi stayed, Messi go. Messi ended up staying. But what else about this transfer market? Were you impressed with what Barcelona did, or are we still down on the board?
No, I want the board down, just like Messi does. But the transfer market, I would say, I don't like what they did with Todibo. I felt like we should have either kept them if we're not going to sign a center back, or we really shouldn't have done what we done with Todibo, to be honest. Suarez, I felt like that was one of the worst ways to really send out a legend. It was pretty sad, to be honest. I was sad that day. I mean, I do understand that he wasn't really doing that well at Barcelona. Obviously, at Atletico, he looks like a brand new person, just like James, right? But obviously, that's because he plays under Simeone. A good coach. I would say Koeman's pretty good too, but the level of Simeone and Koeman at the moment is pretty, but yeah, no, we kind of screwed up in this transfer, I would say, to be honest. Yeah, it wasn't well.
Yeah, it was very, very surprising. But Barcelona obviously strapped with the money issues right now, couldn't really do much. So, Kayla, who is your biggest impact of who moved to a different team this summer?
I think it has to be Leroy Sané. I mean, the move from Man City to Bayern Munich, I think, and the fact that they got him on the cheap, you couldn't ask, I think, for Bayern Munich to continue this long saga of recent transfers to come in and things like that. I mean, he hit the ground, a goal, 2 assists, Bayern Munich thrashed, if I pronounce this right, Shikale on opening day. And, despite the injury, I think, he fits into the system. The offense looks very good. I think, personally, Leroy Sané has been a great, excellent piece for Bayern Munich, and I think he's definitely an underrated talk about in terms of the transfers, and hopefully he'll continue to progress as the season goes on.
Yeah, that was a transfer that we all saw coming for years. I think Leroy Sané made it very clear he wanted to go to Bayern, and they get him for a very, very good price. One of the better bargains, I think, next to Thiago that we saw in this summer. Robert, speaking of Thiago, he is on your big Liverpool supporter. Very sorry, my condolences for the thrashing to Aston Villa over the weekend. But moving on from that, is Thiago the biggest impact transfer that you think is going to play a big role, or do you have somebody else in mind?
Oh, yeah, you read my mind. I was going to say Thiago anyways. Obviously it's biased, but I think Thiago is just that good of a player. Now, obviously, he's not had exactly the biggest transition yet because he contracted coronavirus, so he's been shut down for a couple weeks. By the time they come back from the international break, he'll likely be on the team. So I don't see that being a problem. But he came off the bench against Chelsea, looked great. I think broke a Liverpool record for passes. I think he actually broke a Premier League record.
Yeah, in the first game.
Yeah, and so he looked great. I thought he looked great, and Thiago played really well last season. And it's no surprise that the guy's like the engine of a midfield, and that's really what Liverpool lack, is a creative midfielder like that. Naby Keita shows flashes of it, but he's not consistent enough, and he doesn't stay healthy enough to be that kind of driver of the offense like Thiago is, and be that expert ball carrier that you need. Gini Wijnaldum is obviously good, but he's not as creative in that position. Jordan Henderson's a defensive midfielder, so is Fabinho, and they all have great things about them, but there's not one midfielder that's really super creative or super able to press forward and get in on the attack and really start getting the ball up to guys like Mane and Salah and obviously Roberto Firmino. And I think that's why Thiago's a perfect piece for Liverpool. And it's really the creative midfielder that they've been missing the last few years. As weird as that's to say, because, the last 2 years they've won the Champions League and the Premier League. But this team can only get better. Now with the midfield, I think fixed a bit. Now you start talking about, okay, well, the backup goalie might need a fix because Adrian is terrible. And the back line might need some help because Joe Gomez is just really inconsistent. So as far as what Liverpool was able to do, because I didn't think they'd do anything, getting Diogo Jota, who I think has been fantastic so far. He looked great against Aston Villa, even losing 7-2. I thought he looked great starting for his first time. I think Liverpool actually did some good stuff in this transfer market. So definitely, I think Liverpool's stronger this year, and they just need those starters to come back and Thiago to start. And I think you'll avoid these sort of 7-2 losses to bottom feeding teams like Aston Villa.
Yeah, you hit the nail on the head. I said he was the biggest bargain. I thought 30 million for a guy like that. I think he's a top 5 midfielder in the world, and he gives a lot of things that a lot of midfielders just don't do. He really does a lot of the dirty work in there. I'm going to go to Serie A, and I'm going to shout out Juventus as a whole and Andre Pirlo. I think he's done a really solid job in this project that he's working on here, which it feels like it's kind of a slight rebuild, but at the same time, they can compete for the Champions League because as long as you have Ronaldo, you're going to be competing for Champions League. But they needed to get some of that age in that squad down a little bit, and I think the best one they brought in was Federico Chiesa from Fiorentina, and I think he's going to play big dividends. They spent big money on him to get him up there with Dybala and Ronaldo, and I think that's what they really lacked last season was that creativity up there with them. Because Bernardeschi he wasn't the answer up there. Douglas Costa, and now that he's been loaned out to Bayern or to PSG, or what was it he went to again?
Bayern,
that's right. Yeah, now that he's been loaned out to Bayern now, he's not there anymore, but he was also very inconsistent. And I think Chiesa, 22 years old, he's got a lot of growth coming to him, but I also think he's good enough at the moment based on his form from last year, 11 goals, 6 assists with Fiorentina, that he can help them potentially compete for a Champions League this season. I'm going to go back to you, Manuel, and just looking towards the La Liga season, who would you say is the favorite right now? Do you think it's Barcelona or Real Madrid, or do you think Atletico has a chance?
For La Liga?
Yeah.
To be honest, I would say Barcelona and Real Madrid. Atletico showed in the first game, right? They were just insane, right? João Felix, Suarez, they were linking up together, Diego Costa. But after that, the past two games, they just tied. And it didn't – it shows that they were at least still trying, but they look a little bit more inconsistent. And now that they don't have Partey, that's a huge loss for them, to be honest. So I think it's probably still Madrid or Barcelona.
Yeah, I'm very, very surprised Atletico, they let Arsenal pull the trigger on the release clause at the final hour. Very, very surprising, but a big haul for Arsenal there. Okelo, do you think the same thing? Is it Barcelona, Real Madrid, or do you think that you think Atletico has a chance?
As much as I would like to think Atletico because they still has a strong squad, you have Messi, who's still one of the best players in the world, if not the GOAT, if I do say so myself. I don't really see anything changing. I think Real Madrid, they're going to compete. It's going to be a back and forth, but I personally think, Messi can still produce, despite the rift and despite the problems within the organization. I still think when it comes all said and done, La Liga, it's Lionel Messi. He'll get it done. Barcelona is going to get it done as they always do, and I love Leo, and I think he's going to continue to win another La Liga for Barcelona.
Yeah, I think it's going to be interesting. I echo the same thing. I think it's going to be between Real Madrid and Barcelona. I'm going to lean towards Real Madrid because I'm not sure what I'm going to get out of Barcelona this year. They're kind of in shambles right now, if we're being honest. I mean, they're going to compete,
The front
but
office is a hell of a mess. They're a
Uh,
hell of a
yeah.
mess.
I wouldn't say they're a mess at the moment. Not gonna lie, it's biased, but they kind of do look a little better than Madrid at the moment.
I think if they play Griezmann up front, like I need to
We-
see a full season of him up front.
we
Like-
tried it already twice. That's the thing. Griezmann, the first game he had an impact, because the way that he was playing, he barely even touched the ball, but he was dragging defenders, right? And Ansu Fati was wide open for those, which was amazing, right? Ansu Fati has been scoring almost every game other than the last one. But Griezmann, I don't know. It just doesn't show that he goes to the right, and then now that you have Coutinho, right? And Coutinho has been amazing, by the way, which is pretty shocking because I didn't want him, to be honest. Let's be honest. Whatever happened to him at Bayern, I don't know how they train him, but he came back like a champion. I don't know if he needed that Champions League to like finally feel relaxed that he always wanted, but Coutinho actually looks amazing now. So now that Coutinho plays kind of back and forth with Messi, and Griezmann plays that position too. So the fact that sometimes he has to go to the right side sometimes, it kind of screws him. But then Messi and Coutinho sometimes do go to the right side, and then Griezmann doesn't do anything there. So I don't know. It's kind of like back and forth with him. To be honest, I kind of want to see Ansu Fati as a striker.
That'd be
See
interesting.
how that would work.
It's kind of weird, you know. Griezmann, like you saw, like when they were back at the Internationals Cup, you know, a month ago, he plays amazing for France. He looks like the best player on the pitch every time he plays for France. It's so weird. I don't know if it's Deschamps or if he plays just better under him or what. It's really an interesting dynamic. But going to Robert, you touched on Liverpool, but I'm gonna ask you about Man City because a lot of people had Man City as the favorite going into this year. It has been a roller coaster start for them. They have not looked good at all. And Pep, a lot of people are calling for his head right now in Manchester.
All fraud.
Yeah, maybe. So what do you think about Man City? They're going to turn it around, or are you buying the Chelsea hype potentially with all the transfers?
No, I don't buy the Chelsea hype one bit. I don't think Chelsea's played that great, to be honest. Chelsea is an attacking team with a good midfield and a terrible defense. I'm not sold at all. They don't have the goalie situation figured out. Yes, they got Edouard Mendy, but I don't think he's anything that great. I mean, anything's an upgrade on Kepa because Kepa's been awful for them. But, you know, I think Chelsea have problems in net. They have problems at their back line. Their back line's just not good. They pay no attention to it. So this is what you're going to get. You're going to get a team that can score, but they're not going to be able to keep the ball out of their own net. So if you can't do that, you're either going to have to outscore your opponent or you're just going to have to ride that the whole season. Do I think they'll finish top four? I think they'll finish top four, especially because, you know, some of the supporting teams like Tottenham and Man United and stuff like that don't look great. And Wolves are off to a slow start. Sheffield United don't look near as good as they did last year. I think it's going to be a little bit easier to get in the top four this season. And I think Chelsea have had it enough, and they're better than last year. So they'll get top four, but no, I don't think Chelsea are going to win the league. I think it's between Liverpool and Man City, and both of those teams are just off to a slow start. I think most of the Premier League is off to a slow start. There's not one team. I mean, who's in first right now? Everton's in first. I think Aston Villa's up there.
Yeah,
it's not good. That's not going to last. I just don't think it's going to last. And I think these teams are just getting off to a slow start because of how much, you know, they had to play in the restart and how there's only been really a month break in between to get acclimated to playing another full season. So I think still it's between Liverpool and Man City. I don't think Man City is this bad. You better get those bad losses out of the way early so that when you're actually in the heart of the title race, you're not, you know, sustaining one of those losses. And so I think Man City right now are just in that position, but I think they'll be fine. I think they'll turn it around. I don't think, you know, Pep's going anywhere, and I don't think that team is going to fall out of even the top two, let alone the top four.
I hate the man so much, but his system has always seemed to work somehow, some way. You know it as well as I know it, Robert. Pep Guardiola ain't changing for nothing, and eventually they're going to find a way to get it done. As much as I hate Man City, I think that they're going to be one of the top two when it's all said and done. But I mean, don't sleep on Tottenham. I think, you know, they still have a pretty good young core there, and I mean, Harry Kane is still producing. So I would just say let's just not count out, I think, the Tottenham Hotspurs, who I think are going to be the underdogs this year, to maybe get a Premier League title.
Well, I mean, regardless of how you feel about it, there's a lot of excitement in the Premier League, and that's good. That's good for soccer, and it's very enjoyable to watch. There's no excitement in the other Manchester for United, unfortunately.
Don't remind me.
To Okelo's dismay, there is no excitement coming out of Manchester United. Hence why they're not even a favorite, and that's why we're not even discussing them on the show, because they're an afterthought right now. And a 6-1 loss.
Music to my ears.
I mean, they did one good thing, and that was signing Alex Telles.
Yeah, that was a great signing.
That was so cheap too.
Anything's better than Luke Shaw.
13.5. You ain't wrong, but 13.5 million. That's actually a steal.
Yeah, I just don't think you're going anywhere with Harry Maguire, Victor Lindelof, as your center pairing, unfortunately. So.
Even De Gea at this moment.
He's fallen off a cliff, and it's all thanks to Jose Mourinho, and it's his damn fault that now he's playing this poor because of relying on him all the past couple years. It's a damn shame.
Well, he's going to be pushed by Dean Henderson, so we'll see what happens with United. But we'll see what happens with all these teams going forward. The soccer season has just begun. It has been a great start, and I can't wait to see what happens the rest of the way. Thank you, Manuel, for joining us today to talk soccer. We love having you on. We can't wait to have you on in the future. Stick with us, though, because in our last segment to wrap us up, we are going to go turn over to the other football, fantasy football, where we are going to dive into Okelo's 0-4 train wreck.
I almost beat you this week, though.
We're going to dive into that and see if it's worth if he just quits the league. But stick with us on the other side of the break.
What up, HTF fanatics? We are back for the final segment of HTF Bets today, where we are going to talk fantasy football. New week, same problems. I keep losing, and I almost came close this week to beating Nick Geddes, and my mistake was benching not only Odell Beckham Jr., but Joe Mixon. And for that, unfortunately, your boy is 0-4, and I am in more trouble. I might as well be like the Texans and fire myself because I'm coaching like Bill O'Brien right now. But it's okay because I learned my lesson. And the good thing is my team is improving. But I got to find me a damn quarterback because Matt Ryan ain't doing well. So we're not. I'm gonna just get out of myself a little bit. I want to start off with Robert. How'd you do in fantasy this week, bud?
I'm 1-3 now. No surprise. John Whitley's got a good team, so he gave me his best. I was right there with him until Monday night, and then Aaron Jones he does what he does, and Travis Kelce has not been fantastic. He did well. I think he got me around like 17 points, but it wasn't enough. I had to get Ronald Jones over the weekend because I had another injury to a running back, and I've caught the injury bug on my team. So Christian McCaffrey's on the IR. I had to pick up Ronald Jones. Ronald Jones got me around 15 points. He did great, but Darrell Henderson let me down. Darrell Henderson barely played against the Giants. It was mainly Malcolm Brown. They just didn't have a lot of offense in that game, and so Henderson got me under 5 points, and that was really the tide turner right there. Also, I had the Cleveland Browns defense. I was so happy with the Cleveland Browns defense that game up until like the third quarter, and then Dak and the Cowboys started putting the points up, and they ended up losing me a point. So it was the Cleveland Browns defense. I had the Bills defense 2 weeks before. It wouldn't have fared me much better this past week, but those were the two deciding factors, was the Cleveland Browns defense giving up a ton of points, even in a win, and, obviously Darrell Henderson not performing up to snuff there. So 1-3, not looking great for somebody who had the first overall pick. So what can you do?
Well, welcome to the basement club. I mean, look at me. I'm 0-4. I'm going against Whitley this week, but I'm gonna be like Jim Carrey in Dumb and Dumber, because right now the projections are telling me that I might win. So I'm just going with it. So you're saying there's a chance. So Nick, how does it feel to continue just this epic win streak you've been on?
Rub it in.
Should I just go after him, Robert?
You just lost by a few points.
He's the Atlanta Falcons of the HTF Fantasy League.
Okay, week after week, I come on the show and I tell everybody, and I mean it, don't listen to Okelo's fantasy advice, because this man benched Joe Mixon and Odell Beckham Jr., wide receiver 1 and running back 1 this week, and I walked away with a win. And maybe if they were in their lineup, I would have lost. But
I had Devin Singletary. It wasn't my fault. Ezekiel Elliott just can't hold on to the damn football, and the Cowboys don't like to run. Who can you blame?
Well, Okelo, I'm glad you brought up Devin Singletary because that'll segue into me to what I was going to get to, which was my must start of this week, which is Devin Singletary because he is going against the Titans run defense, which is a terrible run defense, fourth most given up yards per game right now in the league, run defense. Devin Singletary's carries have gone up every single week, and I expect that to continue in that Bills offense right now. That is humming.
Yeah, well, thank you, Nick, for at least bringing that up, rubbing the salt into the wound a little bit. And I'm glad now we were able to get in some starts. I like your start this week. Devin Singletary playing a not-so-good Titans defense who kind of got that weird week off due to COVID. So, maybe Russ might play into the factor. I mean, these are two undefeated teams. I think Buffalo might come out on top because as of right now, I mean, who's going to stop Josh Allen and his MVP candidacy? Robert, I want to go to you. Who is going to be your must-start this week?
I'm going to go with Amari Cooper. Amari Cooper has been real consistent this season. I've been surprised. I thought he was going to sign that deal, and he just wasn't going to be up to it. But if there's one thing that this Cowboys team has actually done well, it's actually been that they're getting production out of their wide receivers. I think Michael Gallup's been good. CeeDee Lamb's been great. Amari Cooper has been a true number one. And as far as, from the Cowboys' perspective, at least that's going well for them because the defense is not. And even Ezekiel Elliott's not really going that good. So I think the Cowboys, have recognized that Amari Cooper needs to be wide receiver number one. And he's a guy that you can rely on. He got me about 15 or 16 points in fantasy this week. He might have even gotten more than that. I had to check again. But he's been consistent. And since I've acquired him from getting him from Sean Green in a trade, he's been putting up points for me every week. And it hurt losing DeAndre Hopkins, but Amari Cooper has been a nice settlement to get James Conner as a running back. For me, Amari Cooper's got to be a must starter at this point. He's just consistent. He's going to have these big games.
He's playing a porous Giants secondary team, a team that might go 0-16 this year. Let's just be quite frank with it. I definitely like it. I think Amari Cooper, he's a must start really every week. Dak Prescott's go-to, a favorite. You can't make any music, but I know Nick always tells people to not listen to my fantasy advice. So my last week's start, unfortunately, for some reason or other, I got snake bitten because Alan Lazard got out with an injury. So let me give you all a redo. And my start of the week this week is going to be Robbie Anderson. Why? Because, again, this is the Falcons' 31st ranked pass defense, which has been atrocious this year. And Teddy Bridgewater and Robbie has been making music. And this isn't because Robbie went to my high school and he's been balling out, but I think he's been a premier receiver, dare I say a top 10 fantasy receiver this week. And I think with this matchup, you can expect Robbie Anderson to at least get you 25, 30 fantasy points. He could be a wide receiver one by the end of this week. So if you have Robbie Anderson, this is a guaranteed points bonanza that you're going to get from him. I mean, like I said, this Falcons defense is horrible. Teddy Bridgewater has been playing really impressive. And I just think that Robbie Anderson's incline has just continued to grow. His fantasy stock is on the rise. Who knows, next year he could be a fourth, maybe high-end receiver, third round next year when it's all said and done. So, I mean, we talked all good at stardoms, but now it's time to sit them. Robert, who's one player that you're not going to touch this week?
Well, Okelo, I think you'll appreciate this, and it's probably no surprise by now. The leader at the quarterback position for the 0-4 Atlanta Falcons, Matt Ryan. If he wasn't already a sit-em, he's got to be a sit-em by this point. They are terrible. This highly touted offense has been good, not great. Julio Jones doesn't look good. Calvin Ridley had an awful game this past weekend. They do not look good at all. And I think it starts with Matt Ryan. It really does. And until the Falcons move on from Dan Quinn and probably Matt Ryan, they're probably a basement team at this point. I just don't think Matt Ryan has it anymore. He's far removed from that MVP season. He's far removed from that Super Bowl, and he's now an aging quarterback that continues to get worse. People talk about Drew Brees' noodle arm, but Matt Ryan's arm ain't looking great either. So he's a big reason. There's a lot of reasons why the Falcons are this bad. I think there's a lot of reasons, but he's definitely a main problem. And if you have him on your fantasy team, it's time to drop him. He's got to go. He's not going to get better.
I'm prepared to hit that drop button. And look, I'm starting Jared Goff this week. So, my quarterback carousel continues. I know you would be happy to say that. You're not going to like my sit-em this week, Robert. I can guarantee you that. But I'm going to go to Nick now. Nick, who ain't you playing this week?
Well, first, back to your Robbie Anderson take. You must have stole that one from my sheet because he was one of my top stardoms. But no surprise there. You had to come up my sheet to get a good one in there.
Oh, ha ha.
But for my sit-em, I'm going to go to Cleveland. And this is not a dig at the Browns, but I am not starting Baker Mayfield this week if you have him. That's right, Okelo. I'm not starting Baker Mayfield. They win games by running the football. They run the football. That's how they win the games. They just put up 49 points against the Cowboys, and Baker Mayfield had 15 fantasy points. Okay, I think that tells the story right there. They're going to run the ball. I know Chubb's out, but Kareem Hunt is a running back one in most any other team in the league. And Dearness Johnson had 95 rushing yards last week too. I think they're going to run the ball pretty good. But they're going against the number one defense in the league. They've given up the Colts defense has given up only 14 points per game, 159 passing yards per game. I mean, they just take the entire passing game out of the equation. You see what they did to Nick Foles last week. I mean, out of the equation. They made them try to run the football, and they couldn't do it with David Montgomery. So all in all, I think it's going to be a tough week for any Browns player, but I'm going to start at the helm at the quarterback position. That's Baker Mayfield. If you're starting him at a quarterback too, I think for this week you might want to look for a different alternative.
Good point that you made there. I mean, like, I'm not going to lie. Like, I'm kind of thinking, like, for Baker Mayfield, it's taken some time for him to do this. The Browns are winning, and that's good. But, we expected, hopefully, Baker to do bonanzas. But, I mean, I would say this. If your quarterback position is very thin, I wouldn't mind giving Baker Mayfield a look. Now, granted, the Colts defense looks a lot better than this. But this is a home game. Baker Mayfield does play good at home. And I don't know. The weather's starting to change in Cleveland, Nick. So when the weather's good, the pelotas feel real good, and Baker Mayfield's ready to ball out. But for my sit-em this week, and I know, Robert, I said be prepared for it, but I'm going to sit Darrell Henderson this week. Sean McVay warned us from August that he was going to use his running backs like the 49ers did, and Darrell Henderson disappointed us on Sunday. A guaranteed matchup. In one of my leagues, I started him, and he only put up 4 points. Lost touches to Malcolm Brown, and now you have Cam Akers coming back. This Rams running back situation has gone from we thought Darrell Henderson was going to be it. Awesome. We're going to go forward, and then he wound up letting us down. And mind you, Washington football team's run defense is pretty darn good this week. I mean, they've only allowed the 8th fewest fantasy points to running backs. I'm just concerned because if Cam Akers comes back, this is McVayism carousel that I'm not going to want to touch. And I think Darrell Henderson is not a running back right now that you need to have as your RB1 or RB2. If you have another alternative, you have to bench Darrell Henderson this week because like I said, until we have a clear-cut number one or we figure out who gets the most touches, it's going to be a damn shame for your fantasy team if you have Darrell Henderson. Robert, I mean, you would have to agree with me, right?
Yeah, when the Steelers play next week or this are they playing this week? Are they back?
Yeah, we're playing.
Yeah, so yeah, James Conner will be coming in. We'll be coming back in. Darrell Henderson will go on the bench, and I'll keep Ronald Jones. So I agree with that.
No problem. I mean, I'm glad I gave you some good options for you to win, but I'm going to add a little twist to our segment to wrap up today. And I know, Nick, you're a little bit surprised, so I'm going to start off with you. Give me one sleeper that you maybe want to have on your roster this week.
Tell you what, it kind of goes with Carolina, and I'm going with Atlanta's offense. Actually, it's kind of weird, and I'm gonna go with Todd Gurley. Todd Gurley has not looked good, but he still can get touchdowns. And I said it in week 1 with Josh Jacobs against Carolina. Carolina is horrendous against the runs. Last season, they gave up 31 rushing touchdowns to running backs. That was 8 more than any team. So knowing that, and Todd Gurley gets a lot of touchdowns already, I think Todd Gurley, 2 touchdowns, maybe a third.
Maybe a third. Hat trick for
the Falcons are going to turn something around. They've got to get him going.
No, absolutely. I agree. I think Todd Gurley, he's been sitting on that. Is he going to get back to that RB1 style he was with the Rams? An RB2 at least. Not worth of a bad idea, Nick. I'm definitely loving Todd Gurley. How about you, Robert? Give me one sleeper you have this week.
Justin Jefferson. Even though they're playing Seattle's one weak point this season so far has been their defense. Their pass defense has not been that great. So I think Justin Jefferson is, I think he's slowly going to be crawling up halfway through the season. He'll probably be wide receiver number 2 or 1 on a lot of fantasy teams just because he is red hot right now. I mean, he is on fire. He looked great. I would say right now between him and CeeDee Lamb, I think clearly looked better. But he's probably been one of the rookies of the year so far, Justin Jefferson. He's looked great. And that Vikings team doesn't have a lot of bright spots, but he is a as bright as the sun right now. I mean, he's putting up points, and he's a clear standout on that Vikings offense. So while they're playing a tough Seattle team that's undefeated this week, I still think, Justin Jefferson can get you some points because the Seahawks do not have the best of passing defenses so far to start this season.
No, I agree. And I think to wrap up for my sleeper of the week, and this one is going to sound a little crazy, but I'm going to go with the rookie, Justin Herbert. Why? Because he's playing the Saints, and the Saints have an atrocious defense. And so far, Herbert has scored 22-plus fantasy points in the first 2 of his 3 games. I mean, who would have thunk that we would be saying Justin Herbert as the premier fantasy quarterback as well as a rookie quarterback so far this year? And I mean, even though he's going to the Superdome, there ain't no fans. Last time a quarterback played in the Superdome, it was Aaron Rodgers. He got over 26 fantasy points. So I'm thinking for anybody who needs a quarterback this week, Justin Herbert is not a bad option to look out to. I think he's still available in a lot of waiver claims. I might even need him this week to beat John Whitley. So, John, if you're listening to this, I'm getting Justin Herbert. I mean, it's still a toss-up with Jared Goff. I think I might stick with Jared. We'll see, because I need a W this week. And but again, I think Justin Herbert, I mean, with Austin Eckler out, you're seeing it. This team is passing the ball more as well. And I think Anthony Lynn's trusting Justin Herbert to let loose a little bit. We don't know what the running back situation is going to be between Joshua Kelly and Justin Jackson. So Justin Herbert, let it go, let it rain, and let's see something happen on Monday night. And just like that, ladies and gentlemen, we are unfortunately out of time. From all the good folks here at HTF Bets, the 3 amigos are pleased to have you on again. Make sure to tune back next week as we discuss more around the betting world. And before I sign off, I'd like to say this, Robert, good luck on Friday. I think the Lakers might finish it, man. And
I hope so.
I will win in fantasy, and I'll check back this next week when hopefully I win. Ladies and gentlemen, peace out.
That's what I'm talking about. Wait! Okay, now, from the beginning.